Hello, and welcome to FTT Chats, where we sit down with some of the great and the good of fintech for a bit of a chat. So today I'm speaking to Nigel Abbott of GitHub. Hello, how are you?
I'm very well. I'm not sure I classify as either great or good, but for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So we asked this question of everybody on our FTT Chats, and it is, who are you and what do you do?
Who am I? My name is Nigel Abbott. I am the Regional Director here at GitHub for Northern EMEA, which is UK, Ireland, Benelux and Scandinavia. And I look after our enterprise team and enterprise offering here within the region for GitHub.
Excellent. So, I mean, we've had a conversation before about the sort of the journey that open source has had in the financial services industry over the past few years, and it seems like right now in 2020, open source isn't really a bad word anymore. It's becoming much more mainstream, much more in use at banks and financial institutions. But it seems like from some of the conversations that I've had that the actual sort of contributing code seems to be something that not a lot of financial institutions participate in. Is that kind of that last hurdle for financial services in open source?
Yeah, I think it quite probably is. So consumption of open source within the banking industry, I don't think is, there's certainly no question around that. The building blocks for many of the great systems that the banks are using are based on open source. I think the stat that I saw released last year by Black Duck was that 96% of proprietary code that was created within the enterprise contained open source. So its place is firmly cemented within enterprise in general, and including financial services. I think if we look at contributions, they are starting, and I think if I look to somebody like Goldman Sachs, they will make wholesale contributions via foundations such as Finos, and I look at the great work that the Finos Foundation are doing for financial services and open source. So it is starting, but I think there's some safety nets there by wrapping it around Finos that gives the banker a level of comfort that I think execs need, and that's helping their contribution. I think prior, until fairly recent times, the contribution had been very low and the consumption had been very high, so it was almost quite parasitic for the banking world. But I think with time, the amount of contributions we're going to see is going to drive up, because I think there's definitely an appreciation within the banks that the open source methodology is the way that software gets written today, and that their engineers, this is the way that they want to operate. So I think the future is rosy for contributions to open source projects for banking.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up about Finos as well. I mean, if you just look at sort of their board, I think that nothing makes banks feel more secure than seeing their peers, giving something credibility. So I agree with that.
Yeah, completely. Strength in numbers, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Banks don't like to be the ones, out there in the wilderness on their own. They like to know that other people are doing it with them. But I mean, that kind of brings me to my next question, which is about sort of security and compliance. And I mean, how do you really balance complying with certain regulations in financial services with being able to fully develop products in an open source environment?
I think it's a dilemma that can cause some paralysis within today's legacy banks. I don't think it needs to necessarily. There's lots of things that we can do to ensure that those guardrails are up. And certainly if we look at the open source community itself, if there's a project on GitHub, and obviously I'm going to cite the open source community on GitHub. But if we look at some of those larger projects, you as an individual developer and as a head, an engineering lead within a bank, as you look at a project on GitHub that's got over 100,000 stars, you can take that on board with a degree of certainty that many eyes make for a shallow bug, or many eyes make for shallow security threats in all of this stuff. And we're doing our part with regards to vulnerability scanning and announcing those alerts to developers as well. So we're driving some of that automation, and I think it's really the part of the banks and the developer teams to onboard this security ownership with the developers as part of their day-to-day operations. I hesitate to use the term shifting left, because as we shift more and more left to the developers, I think there's got the weight of the world on their shoulders. But security is definitely one of those things that I think needs to be gifted to them. But as much of that as we can do through automation and intelligence, the better. And certainly it's a big area of investment for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on something interesting about how sometimes I think culturally regulations are kind of used as an excuse for certain projects, but maybe looking at the other side of the coin, I mean, is there any technology that can be used to give that extra level of security, to encourage a really sort of a safe development environment?
So I think if we look at something like containerization, which has really come to the fore in the last 2 or 3 years, it certainly has a part to play in reducing some of those security threats, because it's a way of packaging up and repeating that dev to production process where the environments aren't necessarily touched by human hands. I don't think it's the be all and end all. I think you've got to take a holistic approach. When you look at the entire SDLC, and when in my experience talking to some of the banks, certainly the consumption of open source is wholesale and regarded as common practice, but then inner source, so the movement by which I'm taking open source principles and applying them to the falls of my organization and applying those practices within my development team, that's much harder to overcome. So if I'm looking at bad actors within my developer team, the fact that if they're in these siloed working practices, you've got an inbuilt security threat there. So the inner source movement, much like the open source movement, is designed to really try and minimize those threats, and that's it's a very powerful model in terms of efficiency, in terms of getting to market quickly, and that's that in financial services, it's like the Formula One race, right? It's the microseconds that count between idea to launch. So if I can do anything internally within my development teams to share and have contributions across the business that make a tangible impact and drive that time to market, then fantastic, have at it.
Excellent. Oh, great. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So our conversation is coming, unfortunately, to an end, but I'm going to ask you one final question, a bit of a human question. So Nigel, I just want to know what brings you joy.
What brings me joy, Liz? Honestly, so many things. I'm one of those guys that has I'm like a magpie for things.
Shiny things, excellent.
Shiny things, definitely shiny things. But my father was an engineer, so I've always grown up playing with cars and motorcycles. So outside of my family, which obviously I have to mention, and they include my two wire-haired Vizslas, I'm probably to be found, tinkering around with spanners with my sleeves rolled up.
Excellent. That's wonderful. I like that very much. I do like shiny things.
Yeah, I like shiny things. Yeah.
Great, Nigel. Thank you very much. I appreciate you sitting down for our chat.
Not at all. Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.